On Christmas, my sister announced she was pregnant with my husband's child. Since you couldn't give him one, she smiled. Mom nodded. I picked up my phone, called one number. My husband's lawyer answered. Proceed, I said. The prenuptial clause activated in 48 hours, and everything in that house, including the chair my sister was sitting on. On Christmas morning, my sister stood by my fireplace in a red silk dress, one hand resting on her stomach like she was posing for a magazine cover, and smiled at me with my husband's child growing inside her. Since you couldn't give him one, she said, soft and bright and vicious, I did. The room went silent so fast I could hear the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. My mother, seated at the head of the dining table like she was presiding over a royal announcement instead of a disaster, gave one slow approving nod. My father stared into his wine glass and said nothing. My husband, Taylor, stood near the tree with his jaw tight, not ashamed enough to look sick, not brave enough to meet my eyes. And my sister, Elise, just kept smiling. It was Christmas. Snow pressed against the windows in thick white sheets. The house smelled like cinnamon, pine, and roasted ham. Gold lights glowed on the tree I had decorated alone because Taylor had been too busy, and Elise had come over only to criticize my ribbon choices and drink my wine. There were wrapped presents under the tree with neat little tags in my handwriting. I had bought gifts for everyone. I had opened my home to everyone, and in the center of it all, my sister had just announced she was having my husband's baby. I did not scream. That was what all of them expected, a broken glass, a wild accusation, tears, begging, maybe a public collapse they could later describe as proof that I was unstable, dramatic, impossible. Instead, I reached for my phone. Madison, my mother snapped, her voice sharp with warning, don't make a scene. I looked at her. A scene? Taylor finally found his voice. Please, just let me explain. Explain? I repeated. Which part, Taylor? The affair? The pregnancy? Or the fact that apparently my whole family knew enough to schedule it between appetizers and dessert? Elise gave a tiny laugh. You always did have a flair for making things about yourself. I turned to her, and for the first time her smile flickered because I wasn't crying. I scrolled to a number I had saved months ago under a fake name, not because I had expected this exact moment, but because somewhere deep down under all the excuses and late-night lies and the way Taylor had stopped touching me unless someone else was looking, I had known something ugly was moving toward me. The lawyer answered on the second ring. Mr. Whitmore's office. Every eye in the room was on me. I kept my voice calm. This is Madison Vale. A pause, then, more cautious now, yes, Mrs. Vale. Proceed, I said. Taylor went pale. Not nervous, not confused, pale. The lawyer did not ask what I meant. He didn't need to. Understood, he said. The Post-Infidelity Accelerated Enforcement Clause will activate in 48 hours. Security and property transfer notices are ready. We'll file today. Good. I hung up. For a second, nobody moved. Then Taylor took one step toward me. Madison? No. My voice cracked through the room like ice splitting over black water. Don't. My sister frowned. What exactly do you think you're doing? I looked at the chair she was sitting in, antique French oak, reupholstered last spring with fabric I had chosen and paid for. It had belonged to Taylor's grandmother, then legally transferred to me in the prenup inventory because I was the one who had restored most of the estate after the marriage. I had catalogued everything, every piece of art, every rug, every spoon in the silver drawer. Taylor used to tease me for being obsessive. Now that obsession was about to ruin him. In 48 hours, I said, everything in this house that falls under my ownership remains mine. That includes the furniture, the accounts protected by Clause 9, the renovation equity, the trust distributions redirected under adultery default, and yes, Elise, the chair. My mother stood so fast her napkin fell to the floor. What are you talking about? Taylor stared at me like a man watching a building collapse, only after realizing he was still inside it. You told me that clause was symbolic, I laughed then. I couldn't help it. It came out low and cold and almost amused. And you told me you loved me. He opened his mouth, closed it. My father finally looked up. Enough with the theatrics. This is family. No, I said, family doesn't applaud while one daughter sleeps with the other's husband. Elise rose from the chair, slowly, deliberately. You know what your problem is, Madison? You always thought money could buy loyalty. And you, I said, stepping closer, always thought being prettier meant you would never have to earn anything. Her face hardened. That expression took me straight back through 20 years. Elise had been born glowing. That was what people always said, glowing, charming, unforgettable. As children, strangers gave her compliments and gave me directions. She learned early that if she tilted her head and widened her eyes, people handed her what she wanted. Teachers forgave her. Boys adored her. My mother built a whole religion around her. Elise was the sun, and the rest of us were expected to orbit. I was the practical one, the organized one, the daughter who remembered birthdays, handled paperwork, got scholarships, cleaned up messes. When Dad forgot to pay taxes one year, I found the notices and fixed it. When Mom overdrew her account, I quietly transferred money while she cried about stress. When Elise wrecked her second car at 23 and sobbed that her life was over, I paid for the repairs because she had so much potential. Potential. That word followed her like perfume. Then I met Taylor. He wasn't dazzling. He was polished, well-spoken, old money trying to pass as humility. We met at a charity gala I attended only because my firm sponsored a table. He seemed to admire me for things other people overlooked. Competence, restraint, discipline. He said he loved that I never had to perform for a room. When he proposed 18 months later, my mother cried harder than I did. Not because she loved him, but because she loved what he represented. The Vale family had money, land, influence. Marrying Taylor levitated all of us, especially Elise, though none of us saw it yet. The crack started after the second year of marriage. We tried for a baby, quietly at first, then medically, then desperately. Tests, specialists, injections, charts, smiles in waiting rooms, silence in parking lots. The issue was mine, according to the first doctor, then unclear, then unlikely, but not impossible. Every answer felt like a different version of not enough. Taylor would squeeze my hand in appointments and tell me we were a team. At home, he grew distant. He stopped asking how I felt. He started working later. His phone was always face down. His compliments became logistical. You handled dinner beautifully. The house looks good. Thanks for sending that check. I thought grief had hollowed him out. I did not realize he had simply moved his hunger elsewhere. Elise inserted herself into our lives the way ivy enters a crack in a wall, quietly, naturally, until one day half the house is strangled. She came by often after her latest breakup. Taylor said she was lonely. Mom said I should be kind. Elise would curl on my couch, drink imported tea, and ask strange questions with a sweet little smile. Do you ever worry Taylor wants more excitement? Don't you think men need legacy? Have you considered maybe he's just disappointed? I should have thrown her out the first time. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and tried to be the bigger person. That had always been my role. Absorb, accommodate, endure. Then came the summer party at my parents' lake house. I found Taylor and Elise on the dock after midnight, standing too close, speaking too softly. When they saw me, they jumped apart with such guilty speed it would have been laughable if it hadn't gutted me. Elise rolled her eyes. Relax. We were talking. Taylor kissed my forehead later and called me paranoid. I apologized. Even now, that part sickened me most. I stayed because I wanted proof. Because intuition is never enough when the people around you specialize in turning your pain into evidence against you. So I started paying attention. I copied records. I called the attorney who had negotiated the prenup before our wedding, a dry, brilliant man Taylor's father had underestimated because he was too polite to show his teeth. I asked hypothetical questions. He reminded me of Clause 14. If adultery were proven by financial records, communication logs, witness testimony, or pregnancy establishing infidelity within the marriage period, accelerated asset protection could be triggered. Taylor had signed it because he assumed only I had something to lose. Men like him rarely imagine consequences applying to themselves. Then, 3 weeks before Christmas, I found the bracelet. Diamond tennis, custom clasped, not mine. The receipt was in Taylor's coat pocket, purchased from a jeweler he had once mocked for being vulgar. Engraving included, for everything to come. I sat in my car outside that jeweler for an hour afterward, hands frozen on the steering wheel, while the truth arranged itself into something sharp enough to hold. On December 22nd, the final proof arrived wrapped in red velvet at my own front door. Elise, in a breathless little act of joy, showed my mother her bracelet while I was carrying in groceries. Taylor has exquisite taste, she had said before realizing what she'd revealed. My mother saw my face and still said nothing. That was when I called the lawyer the first time. By Christmas morning, I was ready. Not healed, not calm, ready. Back in the dining room, Elise crossed her arms over her stomach. You can't seriously think some piece of paper changes anything? Taylor and I are having a baby. That's real. Taylor flinched. Elise, oh, don't start, she snapped. You said you'd tell her I was going to. When? I asked. After New Year's? After the nursery was painted? After my mother hosted your little blessing dinner? No one answered. My mother lifted her chin. This is tragic, yes, but children change things. I stared at her. You knew. Her silence was answer enough. You knew. I repeated, and this time my voice broke. Not with weakness, but with the raw astonishment of finally seeing the full ugliness of someone you had spent your life trying to win. Mom set down her wine glass carefully. I knew they had become close. Elise is 32. Taylor is my husband. And you're calling it close? She can give him a family. There it was. The room tilted. Not because I hadn't suspected it, but because hearing your own mother say aloud that your worth expired where your womb failed is a kind of death no one prepares you for. Even Dad looked uncomfortable now. Margaret. But she pushed ahead, righteous in the way only cruel people can be when they think biology is on their side. You have been miserable for years, Madison. You and Taylor were never going to survive this. At least this way something good can come from it. Something good. My sister carrying my husband's child in my house while Christmas music played in the background. I took a breath so deep it hurt. Then I smiled. That unsettled all of them more than anger ever could. You know what's fascinating? I said. Every single one of you thinks this ends with me humiliated and alone. Taylor swallowed. Madison, please. Let's handle this privately. Privately? You let my sister announce her pregnancy beside my Christmas tree. He stepped closer anyway, lowering his voice. I made a mistake. Elise barked out a laugh. A baby isn't a mistake. He rounded on her. Stop talking. She blinked. Shocked? Excuse me? No, he said, and something in his polished mask finally cracked. You said you were going to keep this calm? Calm? Elisa's voice rose. You promised you were leaving her. Taylor ran a hand over his face. I was working on it. I actually laughed. Working on it? Of course. Suddenly everyone was talking at once. My mother demanding composure, Elise shouting at Taylor, Dad ordering silence in a house that in 48 hours he wouldn't legally have the right to enter without my permission because I had funded the buyout of the estate annex and folded it into a trust Taylor never bothered to read. That was the beautiful thing about underestimation. It leaves a paper trail. I let them unravel for a full minute before I spoke again. Here's what happens next, I said. They stopped. Taylor, you will leave this house today. Not tomorrow. Today. You can take your personal clothing, your watches, and any items explicitly listed in your separate property schedule. That is all. His face hardened. You can't throw me out of my own house. I already did. He stared at me. I walked to the sideboard, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies, never the originals. I was not careless. Of the TRENUP, the trust amendments, the renovation equity agreements, and the adultery enforcement notice already timestamped by counsel. I handed the top page to him. His eyes scanned it once, then again, faster. His hand started to shake. No, he said. No. This is impossible. It isn't. Dad stepped forward. Let me see that. I gave him the second copy. He read more slowly, face straining. Taylor, he said at last. Taylor said nothing. Madison, Mom snapped. You wouldn't destroy a family over spite. I looked her right in the eye. You already destroyed it. I'm just locking the doors. Elise snatched a page from Dad. What does this even mean? It means, I said, that because your relationship with my husband and constituted marital misconduct under a contract he voluntarily signed, his access to shared accounts is frozen. The household staff payroll, which I cover, continues. The property title remains under the trust structure amended after the restoration. The guest house, the cars in my name, the investment distributions, and all furnishings acquired through marital capital tracing default to me pending final settlement. She stared at me blankly. I tilted my head. It means you are pregnant by a man who can no longer afford the life he used to impress you with. That hit. Her mouth opened, then shut. Taylor slammed the papers onto the table. This won't hold up. It already is. You manipulative careful? I said softly. The next 48 hours determine whether I pursue only civil enforcement or whether I invite a forensic accountant to review the transfers you routed through your sister-in-law's shell design account. Dead silence. Taylor froze because that one he had not expected me to know. Elise turned to him slowly. What shell account? He said nothing. I almost pitied him then. Almost. He had juggled too many lies and now each one had teeth. My father looked between us. Taylor. I folded my hands. Should I explain? Or would you like to tell them why $12,000 went through Elisa's Consulting LLC in October labeled Interior Sourcing? Elisa's face blanched. Taylor told me that was for the nursery deposit. I smiled without warmth. Oh, sweetheart. There won't be a nursery here. She looked at him with pure panic now. You said everything would be fine, Taylor whispered. I thought it would. That was the moment I knew he had never intended to leave me cleanly. He wanted both worlds for as long as possible. My house, my management, my money, my steadiness, and Elisa's flattery, Elisa's chaos, Elisa's fertility. Men like Taylor call that complexity when they mean greed. Mom was crying now. Real tears, but not for me, for the inconvenience, for the social fallout, for the horror of having to tell her club friends that her perfect son-in-law had detonated himself at Christmas brunch. You are being merciless, she said. I looked at her. Really looked. The woman who had taught me to sit straight, speak softly, and never embarrass the family. The woman who had praised my endurance when it benefited her and dismissed my pain complicated the table setting. No, I said. I'm being finished. I walked to the tree and picked up a gold box with Elisa's name on it. She frowned. What is that? Your Christmas gift. She hesitated, then took it, opened it. Inside was the bracelet receipt, a copy of Taylor's hotel statement from the weekend of their first confirmed affair, and a printed screenshot of a text she had sent him. She suspects something. Handle it. For once in her life, my sister had no performance ready. Her lips trembled. You went through my messages? No, I said. He was careless. Taylor shut his eyes. I set another box in front of my mother. Inside it was a transfer summary showing every payment I had made over the last 8 years toward her mortgage rescue, medical bills, and country club debt. Total at the bottom. She stared at the number as if it were obscene. Merry Christmas, I said. Madison. Dad began, but there was nothing in his voice. No authority left. Only tiredness. I handed him his own envelope. Deed copy. Not to this house, to the condo I had quietly purchased 3 months earlier. He blinked up at me. What is this? A place for you to live, I said. Only you. Because despite everything, I know exactly who in this room followed and who led. Mom whipped around. What? I met Dad's stunned gaze. You can move in January. It's fully paid. 1 bedroom, Riverview. No Margaret, no Elise, no Taylor. Your choice. My mother looked as if I had slapped her. Don't you dare, she hissed to him. He looked at her, then looked away. For the first time in years, he looked old. Elise set down the box with shaking hands. You can't buy your way out of this. I moved closer until we were nearly face to face. No. But I can buy my way free of you. Her eyes flashed. He loves me. I glanced at Taylor, who was staring at the floor, then back at her. Then take him, I said. That landed harder than anything else I had said all morning because she wanted victory, not responsibility. She wanted the thrill of taking what belonged to me, not the burden of keeping what was broken. Taylor finally looked up. Madison, don't do this. I smiled. I'm not doing anything. I'm leaving you exactly where your choices put you. Then I walked to the front door and opened it. Winter air rushed in sharp and clean. Get out, I said. Taylor didn't move. Madison, take your coat and get out. Mom stood. We are not being thrown out on Christmas. You aren't guests, I said. Your consequences. It ended uglier than it began. Of course it did. Elise cried that I was cruel. Mom shouted that I was barren in more ways than one. Taylor tried twice to corner me in the hallway and once to touch my arm as though his fingers still had rights here. Dad said very little, but when he passed me on the way out, he paused. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But true. So I nodded. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the house was empty except for me, the tree and the ruined meal cooling on the table. I stood in the silence until I started shaking. Not from weakness. From the sheer force of holding myself together for hours while the people who should have loved me most showed me exactly what I had been to them. A wife until I couldn't produce. A daughter until I became inconvenient. A sister until I had something worth stealing. I slid down against the kitchen cabinets and cried there on the floor in my silk Christmas blouse. Mascara burning, chest aching, body folding in on itself around the final truth. Then when it passed, I got up. I put the ham away. I turned off the oven. I poured myself a glass of wine and I called the locksmith. The next 48 hours were brutal. Taylor sent messages ranging from pleading to furious to pathetic. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. He said Elise had manipulated him. He said the baby changed everything. He said we could still protect each other if I stopped the filing. By the second day, he was threatening litigation. By the third, his tone changed again. After his own attorney informed him that, yes, he had in fact signed an agreement with enough enforceable teeth to bite through bone. Elise left voicemails sobbing that she had nowhere to go because Taylor had apparently not told her how much of his money was mine, secured by trust or locked behind my management structures. Mom called me heartless. Then she called me hysterical. Then she called me no daughter of hers. I saved every voicemail. Dad moved into the condo 2 weeks later. I did not help him pack. Taylor moved into a furnished rental far from the old neighborhood because gossip travels faster than shame in places like ours. Elise moved in with him for a month, maybe 6 weeks. Long enough to realize that a man stripped of prestige is just a man who lies, paces and resents child support projections. Long enough to discover she was not special, merely available at the right moment in someone else's collapse. They broke before the baby was born. Mom tried once to broker peace. She came to my office instead of my house, which told me she already knew where her influence ended now. You've made your point, she said. I sat down my pen. No, I made my boundary. You'll regret cutting off blood. I thought of Christmas, of her nodding approval while my sister laid claim to my marriage like a prize animal. No, I said. I regret how long I begged blood to behave like love. She had no answer for that. Months later, when the divorce was final, the house felt different. Mine in a way it never had during the marriage. I repainted the dining room, sold the chair Elise had sat in and donated the money to a fertility grief foundation. We planted the winter garden, kept the tree lights up longer than usual the next December just because I could. People asked if I hated the baby. I didn't. Children are not guilty because adults are hollow. What I hated was the story they had all agreed to tell, that I should step aside gracefully because my body had disappointed them, because betrayal served a biological purpose, because womanhood in their eyes was measured by what could be carried rather than what had been endured. I do not believe that anymore. A year after that Christmas, I spent the holiday in my own home with friends who arrived carrying food, laughter and absolutely no entitlement. The windows glowed, music played. No one lied. No one performed innocence while poisoning the room. At midnight, after everyone left, I stood by the tree with a blanket around my shoulders and looked at the quiet house I had saved from becoming their stage. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. It was a photo of a newborn's hand wrapped around an adult finger. Then a second message. You won? My sister wrote. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back the only honest answer. This was never about winning. It was about no longer letting you destroy me. I blocked the number. And for the first time in my life, I understood something with absolute clarity. I was never the empty one in that family. I was the one they kept trying to drain because I was the only one full of anything real.